Welcome back to A Clock in the Journal, where every second ticks closer to a hidden truth. Tonight, we return to the shadowed streets of London, a city where danger does not announce itself, and violence wears the mask of ordinary life. In this story by Ernest Bramah, a name is whispered rather than spoken, the Bravo of London, a figure without a face, a hand that strikes without warning, and a mystery that survives only because it is underestimated. Listen carefully, for in the quietest moments, London is at its most deadly. Part 2. Chapter 5. The Meeting at 11. With a distaste for being subject to promiscuous observation that ordered the routine of his movements, Mr. Julby stopped the taxicab before Paget Street was reached, and they arrived at the backyard after a complicated but relatively short process of burrowing. One Cha was patiently on watch, and discharged himself of a faithful account of all that had happened in the interval. She larch come and do plenty talky, say he is, say not is, make go. The subject not calling for any particular elaboration, Julby merely nodded. He had recovered his equilibrium now, and Cora's ungrateful flout and the jibe that had been its barb were dismissed into the category of Chili Fank's reference, once to an aquarium, and 1,000 kindred insults. Contributory drops to an ocean of insensate hatred that took little account of individual scores in its unrelenting vendetta against the entire race that was human. "So far so well," remarked Mr. Bronsky with some complacency when they were again seated in the dealer's private den, though he may have had a still more private one somewhere into which nobody but himself ever penetrated, with cigars and coffee of a very especial flavor before them, waiting, as the comrade vaguely understood, for the arrival of some others. "The workmanship of itself," he continued, "leave no shadow of doubts that Larch will be able to satisfy us. Then Nickel, no, I cannot like that young man, is to say how the paper may be acquired. But the others of that you speak, where do they, as it goes, come in? Nickel will tell us all about the mill, but after that we shall have to decide on the most suitable lines for getting to work there. There must be no hitch anywhere when once we make a move in that direction, Bronsky." "I think so also," agreed his guest, "and that is why I ask it." Mr. Bronsky thought intently for a moment, tapping his intellectual brow with a persuasive forefinger until he triumphantly got the happy instance that he was tracking. "Too many cooks, upset an apple cart. Nickel will be able to tell us exactly what we need to know, but it will take more than one to put the thing through when it comes to the real business," replied Julby, reflecting that as the time had to be passed, there was no point in becoming impatient. "No cause to get anxious on that score, let me tell you, my friend. To all except ourselves, this is simply going to be an unusually big and well-arranged plant, and their only idea will be to do their share to make it a success so that they can have their pickings. But once the paper and the plates are safe with us, we can arrange matters according to our own program." "I feel sure you may be right," assented Bronsky, with his usual pliant acquiescence. "Now, as regards these others who are to come in the swim, it is just as good that I should first be told about them, in order to be in a position to judge their ability." There were moments when Mr. Bronsky's consequential little airs of authority made Julby realize what a satisfaction it would be to pick up the nearest heavy object and bring it wholeheartedly down on this shallow-witted comrade's lamentable cranium. It was never more than a passing fancy, for he had long since realized that with the barest modicum of tact, the formidable deputy was as plastic as a stick of putty, and with such contemptuous success had he kept this end in view that Bronsky firmly believed in Julby's high regard and dependence on his judgment. "That's chiefly why they're coming. I want you to meet them here and then tell me frankly what you think of their fitness for whatever we decide on doing. Dodger and Clance you've seen, but another valet I don't suppose you've ever heard of. Then of course there will be Nickel himself, and George was to be here in case anything comes up that touches what he is doing." Dodger, who was call, Bronsky's snapping fingers failed to induce the expression. It was a word for Skalisky. "Slippery? No, Soapy Solomon, you mean. Yes, that is the chap. And Clance was the man we pulled out of Hamburg when he got into trouble over the Vulcan work shindy. They should be good men. I would approve them both. But who is this valet of what you speak? Is he trustworthy comrade? George Larch picked up with him when he was doing his last stretch, and when Valet was on his beam ends, George sent him round here on the chance that I might find something for him. The fact is, Valet slipped out of Dartmoor before his time was up, and consequently, he can't go about much in the day looking for suitable employment. I do not like that very well, objected Bronski, feeling that perhaps he had been compliant long enough. There is too much of the known by the police about so many of your people. If there is a description of this fellow put about and he is recognized, they follow him to here, and then where is we, to say nothings of our project? Oh, I don't think so, Bronski, said Juleby in his most amiable mood. I see your point, and I'm all for being careful, but even if they did nab Valet here, what about it? I'd be much obliged to the police for opening my eyes about the chap, and there would be absolutely nothing to connect him up with us or what we're doing. So far, perhaps, and that's all that concerns us yet. Afterwards we may or may not use him. Besides, they won't. Valet can make up very well indeed. Before he got tired of work, he was on the stage, and if he goes about by day, his own mother wouldn't know him. That puts a different complexion on him, I admit. Unfortunately, Mr. Bronski did not recognize his own witticism. Yes, I begin to think Valet is all right. What is it that we want him for? What is his way of business? Well, he's tried his hand at several things, from calling to test the gas meter to posing as a co-respondent. Anything lightly adventurous would suit his book, and he has a very gentlemanly manner. That's what I had in mind. We have plenty of heavyweights, but we may need to put someone there who can walk plausibly up to the front door. As to his being on the wanted list, well, after all, you can't run a knocking shop with a bevy of virgins. This refined adage was entirely to Bronski's taste and put him in a better humor. Good, good, he exclaimed, showing his splendid teeth. I must remember that one. Is it English saying? Before Mr. Juleby could explain that it was more probably early Egyptian, a little bell conveyed its message, and waving aside such trivialities, he briefly informed his guest that this indicated the arrival of one of the expected callers. I told the boy to send any of them straight through, he added, so he needn't come off the door. Our resourceful friend Nickel. Now this is luck. You are a bit early, Nick, and we can find out where we are before the others cut in. It was Nickel safely back indeed, looking extremely brown and fit, but in contrast to the pair who were all interest and affable expectation, his manner was decidedly offhand, and his expression, possibly a defensive pose, one of seasoned boredom. He greeted Juleby with a careless nod and held up, "Not out," an admonitory hand as Bronski rose, whatever may have been the comrade's intention. I give you fair warning, Bronski, he remarked, that if you try any of your filthy brotherly love on me, I shall stab you. It's much too hot to be embraced. I wonder you haven't gone back to hell, Juleby. You'd find it a damn sight cooler there than it seems to be in Stepney. Kindly put off trying to be funny, Nickel, said Juleby, beginning to glower. Coffee? Already he guessed that the awaited report was not going to be any too encouraging, while this, if it came to the pinch, was certainly not the way to smooth down the already prejudiced Bronski. Nickel's failing. I prefer any other form of poison, since you are so kind, was the reply. Truth to tell, I'm rather sate of coffee and finger-sponge biscuits. Not troubling to speak, but with a very ill grace at this further lapse, Juleby produced his bottles. Meanwhile, having sat down again, Mr. Bronski confided a succession of quote, 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 and TSS's into his beard, and blew out his cheeks between them. Now let's get on to things, said their host, when amid this rather strained atmosphere Nickel had indicated and received his mixture. Our comrade is here specially to hear your report, and since it lies chiefly with us three, there is no particular object at this stage in waiting for the others. You've had all the time you've asked for, Nickel, and with the information you must have got, no doubt you've worked out the scheme. Never mind the considerations now, just the bare facts. In a word, how is it to be done? I can tell you that very simply, replied Nickel, shifting his glass about with trivial deliberation. Not in a word, perhaps, but certainly in 5 at the outside. It isn't to be done." This was worse than Julby's worst. At the most, he had expected a formidable list of the difficulties to be met, but he had never doubted that Nickel, of whose nerve and finesse he had proof, would at least have a feasible plan that would be capable of adaptation. At this setback, all the familiar symptoms of anger and resentment began to possess the being, but his first words were moderately composed, merely because he refused as yet to credit Nickel's conclusions. "What do you mean?" "It isn't to be done," he snarled. "It must be done. We've got to have that paper." "Oh, very well," said Nickel, very creditably, keeping up his pose of nonchalance. "In that case, there's nothing to it but for you to go down there and get it. You take with you my best wishes. Look here, Julby," he continued, switching on to an entirely different tone. "I expect you to feel pretty sick. But if you imagine that this means nothing to me either, you are hellishly mistaken. The only difference is that you get it all at once, while I've been up against it for a month, slowly finding out at every turn and twist that I couldn't get an inch further. You sent me down to find out the conditions, didn't you? Well, you may take my perishing word that in one way or another I found them. You simply can't get in there by force, and there doesn't seem the foggiest chance to frame an act and lift a bunch of the paper. That's my considered judgment. You'd better send someone else to have a look if you won't accept it. Bronsky doesn't seem any too pleased. Let him have a go and try it." During this harangue, Mr. Bronsky had been combing his beard vigorously as a practical outlet for his aggrieved feelings, and he now came to his feet and waved his arms excitedly in several directions as an impressive, if otherwise ambiguous, summing up of the collapsed situation. "If this is all," he proclaimed, "I may as better go." "Sit down, Bronsky," thundered Julby, dragging his great body up and coming to himself at last as he realized the crisis, and Mr. Bronsky obediently did sit down. "It isn't all." His baleful eyes surveyed them both with impartial disfavor. "We need to have that paper for what we are infallibly going to do, and whatever stands between, we are going to get it. As you both very well know, everything has been worked out on the assumption that we shall, and neither Nickel's cold feet nor anyone else's hot air signify a pestilential. I've fitted in all the arrangements here to absolute clockwork. Larch is cutting perfect plates that will defy every test that anyone can make, and Bronsky's people are ready with an organization that would distribute in dead safety. And Mr. Nickel regretfully informs us, spitting his concentrated scorn, it isn't to be done. Now go on and tell us about it, Nickel." "Quite so," agreed Nickel with commendable restraint. "You've put up the dollars and you're entitled to the change." "Well, with a regiment of soldiers forcing your way in would be child's play, wouldn't it? Or if you bought over 6 employees, there need be no difficulty about lifting 1/2 ton of paper, eh? But we haven't got a regiment as it happens, and not a solitary employee is up for sale. Continue in your useful line of cross-examination, Mr. Julby. It's all included in the X's. How can you positively say that there is no weak spot you've overlooked, or that no one can be got at? How must you know? The thing has never even been tried as yet." "Oh, hell no." Nickel shrugged his expressive shoulders at the futility of the inference. "I know all the ancient history of the place, of course, and I happen to know that it's simply because they take damn good care that it can never be successful." "It has never been attempted at all before," chimed in Mr. Bronsky, gathering new hope. "Then I am disposed to agree with Julby that you have missed what you have not seen. It should not be out of the question." "Possibly not, Bronsky," admitted Nickel, behaving his best, "but unfortunately it is out. The kink in your point of view arises from the fact that whereas neither of you has so much as seen Tapsfield through a telescope, for the last month or so I've been exploring its rural beauties. There isn't an inch of ground that I haven't been over, and I don't suppose that there's a man, woman, or child working at the mill who won't really miss me. I've had supper at the vicarage, played darts at the Crown and Anchor, deputized for the local scoutmaster, put up a special prize for the best collection of wildflowers at the Tapsfield and District Horticultural." "What for?" demanded Julby crossly. "To award it to Joyce Jones, so that I might call and congratulate her mother who lives at the Millgate Lodge." "My God, Julby, I even sang Dreaming of Thee at a Saturnalia called A Penny Reading there, simply because the young lady who wanged the piano had a job of feeding a machine in the drawing room. It was women and young girl you got best on with, doubtless, asked the comrade, screwing up his eyes pleasantly. You had agreeable time exploring these local beauties in one way or another, Nickel? Bronsky, said Nickel gravely, you ought to take a fairly strong cathartic immediately before retiring. You have a morbid accumulation of offensive matter somewhere. As an actual fact, the person that I most assiduously worked was a young fellow called Tilehurst, who was employed in the mill office. He needed someone to improve his tennis a bit, and as I was quite equal to that, he simply clung to me and wanted me to go round to their place on nearly every other evening. I got all the routine from him. Do you think that if there was any way through, I shouldn't have spotted it in those circumstances? I'm as keen in the matter of this loot as any of you are, but you may just as well put it out of your minds. It doesn't go this journey. I don't put it out of my mind for the fraction of a second. But I may have to put you out of somewhere, Nickel, if this is the best you can do when you are given a chance of showing. All our work. Come in, George. Mr. Larch, having that moment made an unobtrusive appearance. You may as well know what's going, Bronsky's, mine, and George's, to say nothing of a score of others who are in this thing as well. All this isn't going to be scrapped simply because you and you alone have failed in your department. Failed? I like that, threw back Nickel. How have I failed? I went there to find out the conditions, haven't I? You have failed because you haven't succeeded. That's how. There are no half-ways here. You know well enough that you went to find out the best way of getting what we need from there. You say it can't be done. Very well. As we are going to do it, we must fall back on our own methods, with just so much or so little as you can help us. Now this man Tilehurst you struck. I suppose yon know his ways. Does he go about alone? Could we hold him up down there if we were fixing it that way? Not the least doubt. He cycles about alone pretty regularly, and in those God-forsaken winding lanes anything could happen. But cut out those buts of yours, Nickel. You're only butting up against a brick wall here. And besides, remember, comrade, put in Mr. Bronsky encouragingly, that even if it comes to touch and went and it is not well to stay, you would always find asylum with good friend in Moscow. An asylum? Repeated Nickel, with a sufficiently pointed look. Yes, I suppose that does about describe Moscow now, but I don't want to go into an asylum just yet. And since you dislike the more conventional opening, Juleby, what in hell's name do you suppose is to be got by sticking up young Tilehurst and bringing all the resources of law and order round about our ears? He uses some office keys, one may suppose, continued Juleby, without paying the slightest attention to this objection. Did you happen to make it your business to find out what he actually carries? Naturally. He has the ordinary desk and inner door keys of his own part of the building. None of these are any more serviceable than a corkscrew for getting you into the place, while meanwhile the guard would certainly express disapproval of your presence by drilling several holes through you. Finally, if by any chance you did get in, how are you going to get off with all the weight of paper that you seem to have set your mind on lifting? All the weight of paper. Mark him, comrades. This is our expert advisor, who for the past month has been finding out all about it. Do you know, Nickel? No, of course you don't. You're just from Tapsfield where they make 'em. Acquaint yourself with the interesting fact that banknotes for £1 million can be carried quite comfortably in a single coat pocket. £1 million? Oh, rats. 1 million rats just as likely. What do you say, George? Why, even Mr. Bronsky. Juleby swung himself slowly round towards a shelf, creating by his bulk and labored effort the impression of dumb physical pain that accompanied all his movements. Selecting a moderately small book, he drew it out, verified that it was the one he sought, and flung it across the table. That inconsiderable book, Nickel, is the approximate surface size of a Bank of England note. How many pages are there in it? Oh, about 600, replied Nickel, his casual manner an ungracious protest against being drawn into this unprofitable discussion. About 600, 584 to be exact, since our friend is not sufficiently interested to be prosaically explicit. That means 292 banknote-sized sheets of paper. In other words, 3 little books like that, allowing for the covers and extra pages, represent the bulk of 1,000 notes, and 1,000 notes, each for £1,000, make £1,000,000 sterling. Put that fact into your trouser pocket, Comrade Nickel, and sit on it. Notes of £1,000. This time Nickel had been stirred into something like attention. My good Juleby, what in the name of sanity? I beg your pardon, Bronsky, but seriously, what do you imagine that we are going to do with notes of that fantastic value? A use will be found for them, don't fear. All along, Nickel, I have tried to make you realize that this stroke was not to be a matter of planting a few soft fivers on racecourse bookies. I used to think that you had imagination. We intend to make notes of all the values and chiefly of the big ones. George there will tell you that one is as easy to do as another, and it may further interest you to know, you with your weight of paper, that just over 2.5 pounds weigh 1,000. All this is very interesting, no doubt, said Nickel with an air of polite acceptance, and might even be useful in appropriate circumstances, but my inherent vein of common sense, flattering as it is to be thought romantic, Juleby, continually brings me back to the bedrock fact that the first essential is either to get into the place ourselves, or to have someone in our pay who will do it for us. So, agreed Juleby smoothly, it is one of those that we are going to do, with or without your help, friend Nickel. Now will you take this piece of paper and just sketch for me, quite rough you understand, a plan of the village showing the mill and the other leading features. We will burn it as soon as I have got it off, never fear. Delighted, assented Nickel readily enough, only too glad to show you that I know what I'm talking about. Shall I as well not stay? Asked Mr. Bronsky, suddenly making up his mind. It is more late than I thought. The other ones has not arrived, and you remember my hotel is a little inconvenient. It was only too plain that the comrade's faith in the enterprise had been sadly undermined by the unfortunate turn affairs had taken. Just as you like, Bronsky, replied Juleby without the least show of ill feeling. I ought to have thought of your time, but I left it rather open with the others. About 11, I believe I said, so they naturally won't hurry. However, I'll send round to you soon and let you know how we're going to fix it. Ah, you still think? In the face of the cripple's monumental calm, Bronsky's conviction was again veering. That this thing is going on? It's as certain as the day after tomorrow. Everything is shaping splendidly now that Nickel has done just as I intended. Found out what precautions they usually take and the sort of impression they want to give strangers. You mean that you expected this? That you did not trust of him a way in to discover? Well, scarcely. Juleby's great face was expressive of the most impeccable assurance. Nickel is hardly the kind of chap to help us in that. You guessed what he was all along, but he sees what lies on the surface. There's work for the others now, and we'll have it all arranged and go straight forward. I begin to think that you may be right. Notwithstanding, my report was to have been off-scent. Well, I suppose you can assure them that everything is going very well? In any case, details, even in cipher, could not be put on paper. Mr. Bronsky's wise nod seemed to imply that this was precisely what he had intended. Nickel was still absorbed in his plan, George larch away in thought, and there appeared to be no further inducement for the comrade to linger. Then I may as well, he resumed, but his voice was now half apologetic. Go by all means and get a good snooze, was Juleby's cordial advice. I'll let you know. A minute, though. Here's someone else arriving. According to the arrangement, he came in unannounced, and for a moment stood at the door, picking up the scene with a quiet, self-possessed look of well-bred interest. Scarcely the type of man to have earned the nickname Soapy Solomon, while the patronymic Clance would be even less convincing. This, then, must be Mr. Juleby's gentlemanly-mannered recruit, the ex-convict valet. Juleby grunted a careless word, Larch contributed a friendly gesture, but it was Nickel, coming to his feet so impetuously that his chair went spinning back, who startled them all into a confused wonder as to what on earth was happening. "Tilehurst," he cried out sharply. "What in hell's name are you doing here?" Then, as the newcomer continued to stand, amiably discomposed, and the others began to glance away from the two most concerned, and to look at one another. "Why don't you speak? This must be a bloody fine frame-up for you to drop in here. Are all the lot of you in it?" His hand slid to a hip pocket, and the blue of steel came level. "By God, Juleby, if you think that you are going to put me away to suit your game the same as you did, to blazes with ye next," roared Juleby, towering above the row as the others began to join in, and killing Nickel's voice before the name was spoken. "What's ye crazy notion now, ye rotten-hearted rabbit? Whether the hell you think you're raisin', Nickel? Why have you brought Tilehurst here? That's what I want to know," retorted Nickel, still excitedly worked up, but beginning to recognize that, as he was hopelessly at sea, he might not have been so seriously betrayed as he had in the first rush of blank surprise passionately concluded. "There must be some funny double-crossing going on for you to let me talk as I did, and never say that he was in it." "Nonsense, Mr. Nickel. It's you who're being funny," put in George Larch mildly. "This chap's name is Valet. Both Mr. Juleby and I know him. All this rumpus about Tilehurst is something of your own inventing." "He may be valet to you, and you may both know him," retorted Nickel. "But I know him just as well, and it's as Tilehurst I've known him. I've been seeing him pretty well every day for the last month, going there to tea and playing tennis with him. Is it likely I don't know the fellow when I meet him the day after? If I stood up here just as I am and someone said, 'No, this isn't Nickel. His name's Jim Snooks,' would that convince you? Look here, Tilehurst," turning to the stranger, "kindly put the lot of us wise and explain the mystery of this dual existence." During all this lively scene, Mr. Valet had remained standing near the door. He might, as Mr. Juleby had implied, have become too indolent to work. But he had the stage aplomb, and he waited for the most effective moment to intervene with a natural actor's instinct. "Thank you all very much indeed for this really fine reception," he said in a quiet and very distinct tone, at the same time advancing a few steps so as to take up the center of the picture. "Now, do you mind telling me what it's mostly about, as I seem to have missed the caption?" "Your voice is certainly miles different," admitted Nickel grudgingly and staring very hard. "Look here, do you actually mean to say that you aren't Geoffrey Tilehurst?" "Not to the extent of a solitary brace button so far as I'm aware," replied Valet glibly. "But if there's anything in the nature of a missing heir, or a lonely old millionaire, or even a neglected wife, I'm quite willing to oblige. It's simply incredible. Except for the voice, and yes, perhaps something in the manner, you would deceive the very devil." "Well, you can quite set your mind at rest about it, Nickel," Larch assured him. "I've known Valet for the past 2 years, and most of that time we've both been in geological research work for the government, the granite strata of Dartmoor." "Julian Juleby," purred Bronsky softly. "I'm listening," was the reply. Doubtless he was, but his deliberate eyes were fixed on Valet's face, and the beat of his throat was distressing. "If these two peoples are so undissimilar—" "Crikey," said Larch, following their thoughts. "That's certainly an idea." Nickel, who ought to have been the first, was the last to catch the suggestion. "My hat!" he exclaimed, banging the table with his fist. "If we could put it through, what a dead cinch we should have there!" "Well, why not?" said Juleby coolly. "A minute ago you were ready to take your oath that he was Tilehurst. Why should anyone else be so much wiser?" "But the voice," objected Nickel. "I hadn't heard that then. They're no more alike than a sparrow and a cuckoo. If we could get over that, why, damn it, even now when I look, I more than half believe that he must be," and Valet's back being turned. Just then Nickel went a step nearer and called out sharply, as if to take him by surprise, "Tilehurst!" But instead of being startled into admission, Valet merely turned slowly round, and politely smiling said, "Oh, I beg your pardon. What am I supposed to do now?" "Well, Nickel," prompted Juleby, with the unspoken insinuation in his tone again, and this time Nickel's vista had responded further to the suggestion. "Suppose we discount the voice. Frankly, I haven't a flicker of hope that it could be done, but for the sake of arguing the possibilities, Valet at the most favorable moment appears there. He'd be walking on a mine. The man's position is technical and detailed. All the coaching that I could give in advance would be general and superficial. He must make a false move. He must give himself hopelessly away before we could profit by it. The chances are too grotesque. And the instant the real Tilehurst appeared, when that happens, not only the bottom falls out, but the sides cave in, and the lid comes down on whatever is left of the situation." "Yes, when—" Juleby dropped the word significantly and left it at that to develop the implication. "You mean?" Nickel stopped wrinkling his brow and biting his underlip in doubt, to challenge, wide-eyed, this masterful solution. "Again, why not? In those God-forsaken winding lanes, anything may happen." "Quite so. But I draw the line at murder. So does anyone but a fool or a successful hero. Especially when there's no need for it. But gagged men tell no tales, and we shall have plenty of nice cellar accommodation. 10 minutes ago I told you, Nickel, that we were going to get that paper. Not because I had a glimmering how, but simply because we must have it. We are still going to get that paper, Nickel, neither more nor less than we were before, but perhaps you are not quite so cocksure now that it's going to be impossible to get it? I should like to think we could. And this valet stunt is certainly a miracle. At the same time, perhaps because I know the ropes down there pretty well, I don't see how we are possibly to get over. You are not being asked to see how now. From this point on, I propose to do all the necessary see-howing. What you are being asked to do is to obey instructions to the letter and not to get the bellyache whenever you visualize a copper." "That's a damned unpleasant thing to say," retorted Nickel, but not so warmly as he could have wished, for the excitement of the project was taking hold of him, and intoxication of any kind may equally either quicken or blunt a Nickel's amour propre. "It's a damned unpleasant thing to have to deal with," was Juleby's tart reply. "We must make allowances for one another. Well, comrade, really going?" It was Mr. Bronski who occasioned this aside, a smooth, complacent, and now wholly reassured Bronski. Conversation with simple, respectful George Larch, and that quite charming fellow valet, had convinced him that everything was going to turn out finely. "I may now just as good since that full-place hotel of mine," replied Bronski, vague but unmistakably cordial. "It goes well, Juleby?" "It goes even better than we thought, don't you fear, comrade. You shall hear at the next stage through one of the usual channels. It may be a week, 2 weeks, even 3 or 4, but it goes inevitably." "I think so too, also, and I shall let headquarter know in like strain," assented Mr. Bronski. He proceeded towards the shop, waving gracious adieu. "God be—" "No, no!" "Au revoir, comrades. Good night, Mr. Bronski." Larch called after him. Valet bestowed an engaging smile, and Nickel's casual, "Oh, go to hell, comrade," while conversationally given, had been just too late to create unpleasant feeling. One Chow, as spiritually detached as a preoccupied cat, was there to make unfast the outer door, and on him the worthy man bestowed a final blessing. "Hope, class-oppressed little comrade, hope, and—" Mysteriously pressing a finger to his lips, Mr. Bronski waited to make his exit. "Hope some piece silver, allee same, comrade," prompted Won Chow, displaying an expectant palm, but the comrade suddenly became deeply interested in his watch and passed abstracted ly into the unstirring darkness. "We'll let it go at that, then," conceded Nickel, reverting to the subject at the point where Bronski had interrupted. "You to be solely responsible for the general campaign and the plan of battle. I haven't the slightest objection to the strong, silent man, Juleby, so long as he is silent and doesn't begin to shed sawdust badly towards the finish. Bring it off in whatever way you like, provided it shows nuggets, and make no mistake about my being in bald-headed with you. But money I must shortly have, or my address will be Young Nick, care of Old Nick, the Shady Corner, Hades. There's one thing, though. this coprolite-witted Bronsky. What about him? Nickel shrugged his shoulders to indicate the inexpressible ambit of Mr. Bronsky's obvious shortcomings. What not about him if it comes to that, but, specifically, he isn't in it with us. He's got some wildcat scheme of making everybody happy by making everybody else miserable. It won't wash, you know, Juleby. It isn't economically sound. Now you and I and old George and Valette and the rest are simply out to snatch the oof, I take it. And that's a rational proposition. But Bronsky, with his blasted universal brotherhood, is as likely as not to queer the show if he thinks it's to the common disadvantage. "Leave that to me, Nickel," said Juleby, with a reassuring look of mutual understanding. "We are out to make big money this time, and Bronsky will be useful. He can give us facilities for getting the stuff away and for putting it about on a scale that no one else could offer. If he fancies that we are doped by his communistic hogwash, so much the better. He won't work for us any the worse for thinking that we're playing his game instead of him playing ours. So long as it goes at that. It does go at that, Nickel. As you say, what other end could you and I have in view except to line our pockets? Now I want you to take Valette in hand and drill him stiff with everything that has to do with Tilehurst and Tapsfield. Of course, he'll have to make up quite different and go down there and work Tilehurst for himself before we put it through, but he may as well get all he can from you before he goes there." "Right you are. I'll put him wise," undertook Nickel briskly. "After all, it's entirely your circus. Shall we stay here and—" No, take him away now and arrange it yourselves. I'll let you know what the next move is. Go. And take George as well. I want to be alone soon, and I have a couple of other chaps due in about 5 minutes." "The hell you have," said Nickel, glancing at his wrist. "At 12? Clance and Soapy Solomon, I suppose, but didn't I hear you tell Bronsky that you had called them for 11? And for the matter of that, my friend, you told me it was 10:30 sharp, and then when I was a shade behind the time, chipped me for being early." "Did I?" conceded Juleby, discreetly vague. "One forgets these little things when there's so much else needed. I think I must have done about enough for one day, Nickel. I'm feeling tired. Very strangely tired." It had been a full and exacting day for Mr. Juleby, even touching only so much of it as has been told. And now, Clance and Soapy Solomon conferred with and dismissed, the uncouth bulk of the toad lay sprawling in collapse within a great armchair, nothing but the arresting beat of that pendant throat to say whether he was dead or living. He might have slept indeed, but Paget Street itself now settled down into an uneasy drowse on a night when its tarred road bubbled. Paget Street had long averred that Juleby never slept or even closed his eyes, but this was manifestly wrong, since closed they were, though his restless, distempered brain denied him the relief of oblivion. Flashes of memories, doubts, hopes, hates, and plans stabbed broken splinters of bright light across his sanely fanatical mind, and if these had been patterned into coherent thought, this would have been the thread of expression it followed. Help you to wealth and the life of easy pleasure that's your ambition, you venal jackal. And help you to power and Soviet rule and universal brotherhood, you feeble mountebank. Money! Would millions buy me an hour of happiness? Power! Would any but a clown dream that such as I would give my back to be his stepping stone? Soviets, England, China, India, all the nations and the earth itself, capitalists, bourgeoisie and slaves, man and gods, I hate you equally. Universal brotherhood. To me, you dogs, you curs, you fawning, whining, snarling, mongrel, human pack. Ah, but I'll use you to my end. Men, women, and children, all alike. Nothing to any but a soulless, cold-blooded, grotesque toad. No man has ever thought of me with friendship. No woman looked at me without a shudder. No child withheld a stone. And I have waited. Yes, Bronsky, you shall have your way and play your little part, and after you another, bringing you in your tin-pot state crashing to the ground, and after him another to wreck him, and then another, and another, and another, until chaos meets itself right round the earth, and civilization is down at last and no one left to laugh. And yet that blind man was happy, and could smile as though he had lost nothing, while have I ever really smiled in all my life? No, I've only pulled a sort of grimace to make them think that I was like themselves. But I'll be even with him yet. That blind man who could be happy, and with Bronsky, the hopeless fool, and with Nickel for his cursed impudence, and with Larch and Valet and Icky and Clance and Solomon, and that whore Cora, and all the other women who have shuddered, and every one I have ever known. I'll show them. They've all laughed at me behind my back, mocked and pointed and made signs. I'll see them burn, writhe, and shrivel up. I'll live to see it yet, live to shout out that I, Juleby the Toad, have done it. That will be the best of all, when they look up with their foolish, startled faces and understand at last. Then I can go down among them with a sword in my hand, and stab and slash and spit as I always longed to. Oh, that the whole world had one single body, that I might crush it, that I might tear it with my teeth, that I might smash it into atoms. A sudden crash snatched one Chow straight out of his dream of a flour junk on the Canton River. The simple child of the East slept in a rug on the boards of the shop, wearing the dress that was his everyday garb. With stealthy glide he approached the door of his master's room, listened, cautiously peeped in, then entered. Mr. Juleby lay on the floor beside his special chair, his face doubly terrible in its rigid set, his body writhing this way and that, with spasmodic jerks and contortions. An epileptic like many exceptional personages of all times, he was only experiencing a visitation of his old trouble. Smashed to 1,000 bits, brought down in his fall, the wreck of a rare and delicate Dresden china group lay all about him. One Chow took the scene in with a face that betrayed no vestige of emotion. Silently, and with neat dispatch, he pushed the heavy chair out of the way, spread a few draperies about the floor, forced a wad of cloth between Mr. Juleby's clenched teeth, turned out the light, and left him. Chapter 6. Tilehurst fails to keep an appointment. "Anything interesting among your letters, Geoffrey?" asked Miss Tilehurst, concealing a protective curiosity under this sociable wile, since she had already inspected the covers. And to show how purely conversational the inquiry was, she reciprocally added, "I've had nothing but a long diatribe from Geraldine Churt about her numerous ills. One would really wonder if the foolish woman thinks that her commonplace symptoms are unique or amusing." "No, nothing particular, Aunt," replied Geoffrey, immediately putting the one letter that mattered away in a coat pocket. Then, with the unpracticed dissembler's inability to let well, or indeed any condition alone, he must needs elaborate it. "Just a bill and a couple of appeals and a line from Muston about the tournament and so on, none of them exciting. And egad, is that the time? I shan't have to do some hoofing." "Don't hurry immediately after your breakfast, Geoffrey. You know that clock gains 5 minutes every day, and it's only—" called out Miss Tilehurst, but Geoffrey was technically out of earshot then, and the slam of the front door put a full stop to the unfinished monition. Of course, even if he had not fled, she could not have pursued the subject after his disclaimer, any more than she could have looked into the envelope with the unrecognized handwriting, even if he had left it behind with the others now on the table. No, it was as she had guessed, that was the one that he had slipped away. As for the others, there was no harm in just glancing over them since he had said what they were, and for the matter of that, she had known almost as much before he told her. Ellicott's usual bill, Barnardo's Homes and a hospital for the mentally afflicted, a new edition of some encyclopedia or other, a Dutch bulb grower's list, she had better look through that, and Mr. Mostyn's letter, but the one in the unknown script and with a metropolitan postmark, could it be from some London woman? In spite of having lived in the country all her life, and for the most part in remote Devon, Miss Tilehurst had always understood that such beings really existed. Meanwhile, the subject of her virginal solicitude, perfectly well aware of the clock's chronic lapse, was proceeding on his leisurely way and even finding time to take out the implicated letter again and verify its contents. Camperdown Hotel, London, Friday afternoon. Dear Tilehurst, I hope you haven't been thinking me an awful oaf for not writing to thank you for so many jolly games after I left Tapsfield. To tell the truth, I've been expecting to get down one afternoon to say goodbye before I sailed, but instead I've been nearly run off my feet every day, what with one thing and another. Now to top it all comes a business cable to return at once, and I'm going, first part overland, tomorrow. Now that I am on the point of leaving, with the extreme improbability of ever seeing England again, I seem to recognize how large a share your, may I say, friendship, has had in making my visit so pleasant. While looking out my route by that mysterious affair Bradshaw, I have come across a detail that may enable me to salve my conscience, though it is really putting you to more trouble. The point is that instead of going right through by the connecting train which stops at Stanbury Junction, I shall travel by the one before and break the journey there. This will give me 15 minutes at Stanbury, from 2:29 to 2:44. If it is not asking too much, I wonder if you would cycle across and test the dubious resources of the station refreshment room in a final. I seem to remember that you are not generally particularly engaged so early on Saturday afternoon, and the whole affair needs scarcely take up more than half an hour. The fact is, I have a small memento of my stay that I would like to hand over to you if you will graciously accept the trifle. I would also ask you to carry a little offering from me to Miss Tilehurst, not to repay her charming hospitality, which would be impossible, but to remind her now and then of my existence. But please don't tell her anything of this until you are back again. I should like it to be a complete surprise. In fact, I wish you wouldn't mention about my going through to anyone until after. There are at least a dozen people I ought to see, and although I can't help it, I feel somehow guilty. Sorry that you won't be able to let me know in any case, but I shall have left the hotel for good before you get this, and for the rest of the time I am bung up to the eyes clearing off arrears. Of course, if you have anything important on, you must let me down, but unless it's really impossible, I know you are too good-natured to disappoint me. Yours ever gratefully, Anthony Dixon. The terms and tone of this communication made Tilehurst experience a passing sense of dereliction also. Had he really done so frightfully much to earn Dixon's gratitude? Oddly enough, he had scarcely thought of him again once he had passed on and out of Tapsfield, while the chap had apparently meanwhile been regarding him as his especial friend and mentor. Actually, it might be thought quite as much the other way, since Dixon had certainly put him up to the knack of improving his backhand game considerably. And in return, well, a few hours, play each week, tea or supper if it happened to be about, and an introduction or two so as to give a stranger with plenty of time on his hands somewhere else to go to. Then, yes, he had shown him all over the works, if one could call that entertainment, and certainly these colonial beggars were pretty keen stuff when it came to technical points and wanted to see and know absolutely everything. However, since the fellow looked at it that way, the least that he himself could do would be to push along and meet him. As he said, it would scarcely mean more than half an hour's time, while so early in the afternoon he could hardly expect to encounter Nora Melhuish about if he hung around on the off chance. An opportunity to take Nipper for a good run on a hard road as well. The dog's claws were getting far too long, doing nothing but lying about all day in the garden. Certainly he would meet Dixon. Nickel had made a wry face over writing the letter, but when Julby told him, dryly enough, to think out a better way, he had to come back to the admission that he could suggest nothing better. All the same, it's a dog's trick, getting a man like that, he commented. I don't mind cutting him out. That's got to be done, and it's all in the day's work. But a damned hypocritical letter like this, well, it's about the limit. Don't be a fool, Nickel, replied Julby, glancing equably over the top of the paper as he considered it. You talk like as if you were an old established country lawyer arranging a mortgage, and let me tell you that there are good dogs and bad dogs if you think that way about it. The good dogs get the bones and pats, and the bad ones get into the lethal chamber at Battersea. Now this is a pretty fair letter." "Thanks for the pat, kind master," said Nickel contemptuously. "All the same, if it was not for the anticipated bones, I might relieve my mind a little." "If it was not for the bones indeed, Nickel," was the cool reply, "what might we not all? However, these interesting side issues are never worth exploring. What is probably affecting your humor at the moment is a sort of half-suspicion that the letter may implicate you personally, eh? Since you mention it, whether I was thinking so or not, it certainly does have that appearance. If it comes to a sauve qui peut, you fellows may get away, but this connects me up past explaining. If it comes to a sauve qui peut, Nickel, you'll admit that I should be a slow away-getter. For that reason, I don't go into this with the idea of it turning out wrong, but in the conviction that it's going to be stupendous. You're a poor psychologist, Nickel, but never mind. We'll get the letter back and wind up Anthony Dixon past all tracing." While it was reasonably certain that Tilehurst would respond to Dixon's bait, while also the general progress of his doings could be plausibly assumed, there were crucial details on which it was vital to be exact, and arrangements had been made, and were successfully carried out, for following all his movements and for keeping the directing authority informed of each development. These headquarters were represented by a large, closed motor car that had taken up a position in the lane which Tilehurst would probably choose if he cycled direct from his house to the station. But since Brookcroft lay half a mile outside the village, there were, in fact, two nearly equal routes, and almost the last service of the intelligence section, after their man was seen to be committed to the journey, would be to signal by which approach he was to be expected. Nickel had made a choice of lanes, but this at the best was only guesswork, and the place had to be selected with an eye to the possibility of slipping round, via the station fork, into the other lane, and taking up a position there if need be. In the event this obligation did not arise, blissfully unconscious of the fact that every step he took was being shadowed, Tilehurst trundled his bicycle out by the side gate of Brookcroft soon after 2 o'clock, called the overjoyed Nipper to follow, and after pausing to glance at his watch and light a cigarette, mounted and began to pedal unhurryingly towards the anticipated lane, with the easy thrust of a man who has just made a substantial meal and knows that he has plenty of time and to spare for his appointment. So far nothing could have been better, but at the moment when everything was going so well, there came one of those unforeseeable chances that reduce even the most circumspectly arranged plots to the significance of a mere toss-up. That grassy cut-across lane was deserted enough at any time, and in the early afternoon of a hot summer day the chances were a good many to 1 against the risk of interruption. Yet as Tilehurst approached it, from the opposite direction appeared Sprout, the village constable, also a wheel and bound for the same objective. He touched his hat as he turned into the lane, and slackening his pace, somewhat looked round to see if the other cyclist was following. With the easy social convention of the countryside, when out of doors, Tilehurst would, in the ordinary course, have caught him up, and they would have progressed companionably, wheel by wheel, for as far as their way lay together, discussing the simpler aspects of Tapsfield existence. Then in a flash, Tilehurst realized that Sprout would quite probably refer to Dixon, possibly to ask if he had been heard from since he had gone, or some equally inconvenient question. The predicament need not have been an embarrassing one, and, given minutes instead of seconds to make up his mind, the Juleby-Nickel plot might have very simply miscarried. But in that ambiguous period, the merest trice allowed him for decision. Tilehurst only visualized the effect of prevaricating to Sprout about Dixon as they rode along, and then, possibly under the policeman's disapproving eyes, being greeted on the platform. In the circumstances, he jumped at the easiest thing. He drifted past the lane with an amiable wave of recognition, pedaled slowly along until he had given the other man ample time to have gone well away, then turned and leisurely resumed his interrupted progress in the same direction. The roomy car now drawn up in the secluded lane had been converted to its purpose by bodily removing the inside seats, but with the blinds drawn against a blistering sun, there was nothing in this to detract from its otherwise quite ordinary appearance. The spot it occupied had been picked with every consideration under review, and though the available choice of road was not unlimited, the place conformed well enough to the necessary conditions. It was, in fact, a short, straight piece of ground with a bend at either end, and a comparatively long, straight piece of road stretching away from it in both directions. Thus, while screened itself until actually reached, anyone there could command the two approaches by walking the score or so of yards that comprised that section. In this almost sylvan retreat, a wood behind, in front meadows seen through a grill of hedge, the occupants of the car had decided to halt and picnic, and a real tablecloth spread on the grass by the roadside indicated the thoroughness of the occasion. This development had several effects. It enabled the road to be almost blocked, and anyone who passed to be constrained into a desired channel. It explained the presence of as many people lolling about as were required for the venture, and above all, it allowed the car and its party to remain in that not otherwise very explicable spot for hours if necessary, without arousing a scintilla of suspicion. This was the carefully spread net that Geoffrey Tilehurst approached after he had given P.C. Sprout his one chance of escape, ample time to get clear of participation. He almost tumbled upon the guileless tableau, the drawn-up car, the two men and the girl talking and laughing around the table, the third man, and this reduced his leisured pace still more, for it was questionable which side he must pass on. The third man moving about what was left open of the roadway. Then this man appeared suddenly to realize his presence, for instead of standing aside he remained obstructively where he was, interrogation in his poise, and Tilehurst understood that he wanted to stop him. The motor bandit had not yet arrived, and there was no more on the surface of the incident than if you or I had been asked for a match in Piccadilly. The cyclist obligingly pulled up. Indeed, by that time he had no option, dropped 1 foot to the ground and waited for the inquiry. "I say, I'm awfully sorry to trouble you like this, but we haven't the murkiest idea of where we've got to. Do you mind telling me where we really are?" "Oh, yes," came a feminine voice from the other side the car. "Do get to know, Tommy. It's about time we pushed off if we're to do any bathing." Tilehurst was one of those amiable creatures who find an altruistic pleasure in performing these small services, telling the time and the way, guiding a blind beggar across the road, recovering a lost ball, making up the penny deficiency in the bus fare for old ladies who have somehow miscalculated their resources. If he gave a thought to the one weakness of the contrivance, for why had they not asked Sprout, that obvious official fount of information, he at once dismissed it as capable of some very simple explanation. "Well, it's about 1.5 miles to Tapsfield along the lane," he replied, turning to nod in the required direction. "The way I'm going will bring you to the crossroad near Stanbury Junction and on to Crowgate or Slowcumber according to which you take. Or, of course, back to Tapsfield if you turn sharp at the Dog and Plover." Ask him where we are," chimed in the girl's voice again. "I don't know that we're actually pining to get to any of those earthly paradises he's mentioned." The spokesman smiled apologetically. "You see what it is," said the look, establishing the male understanding. Then aloud, "I wish you'd just pick out the place on the map for us. I've got one here quite handy." Without waiting for the implied assent, he opened the near door of the car and disappeared within, reappearing a moment later with a large road map that he spread out, but remaining just inside the car himself so that it became necessary for Tilehurst to go nearer. One of the other men had meanwhile strolled round, and the way was still barred, to use so harsh a term about so fortuitous a happening, against escape in that direction. And now the last man in sight got up from the sward, apparently taking a handkerchief from his pocket to brush stray crumbs away, and casually passing round the car on the unguarded side closed the trap at its final outlet. Still, every face had the conventional, agreeable air of those who are being obliged. The girl just across the road began to carol a little popular snatch lightly, and Tommy, at the car step, following the line of his own finger, was murmuring, "Now let me see. We are where?" as he traveled halfway across the county, waiting for the obliging stranger to inform him. Tilehurst knew that he had plenty of time to the good, and he did exactly what had been foreseen he would do. In any case, the result would have been the same then, although the details might not have dovetailed quite so workmanly. He swung himself wholly out of his bicycle, propped up the machine against the car wheel, and turned to the open door to point out the position on the map now held out towards him. The man with the handkerchief was immediately behind, intending seemingly to look on as well. The third man. The map was a large limp sheet, and Tilehurst was constrained to put out both hands to receive it. What actually happened, he never quite knew himself, for the universe of conscious thought rushed to extinction at one unbearably crowded point, and afterwards, everything to do with that episode was dim and tangled. But in the other participants' sight it was far from being confused, for every detail had been carefully considered and rehearsed, and each one did his part in perfect time and precision. Tommy, holding out the map, closed with a rat-trap grip on the wrists of the two hands coming towards him. The saturated cloth was pressed against Tilehurst's nose and mouth. The other man, practicing the simple schoolboy stroke, brought their victim to his knees on the running board, as helpless as a ditched wether among the three men crowding round him. The girl continued to sing about love and undying devotion. In 15 seconds the anesthetic had done its work, and the inert body was cleanly lifted into the car, to be stripped, reclothed, bound, gagged, and left, covered with rugs, unconscious on the floor. It would scarcely be too much to say that people might have gone by without noticing that anything unusual was happening. 3 minutes later, an identical Tilehurst emerged from the car. The others paused in their orderly work. They were removing every telltale trace and preparing for return, to inspect him critically. "Oh boy, but you sure look some," was drawn from one in frank approval. "Now that you're in his togs, the guy's own mother wouldn't suspicion you." It was possible indeed, but there was one small, faithful friend who was not to be duped by clothes or outward appearance. Nipper, having taken the opportunity of his master's inattention to engage in a private rat hunt along a drain, had voluntarily returned, and after puzzling over the situation unnoticed from several points of view, had abruptly decided that there was dirty work afoot, and this spuriosity the villain. Uttering foolishly futile yaps of challenge, his sure undoing, Nipper heroically launched himself against the foe, only to be met by a straight, deliberate kick that sent him reeling. Before the little dog could collect himself again, Valet had snatched up the readiest tool, a weighty spanner, and with a single vicious blow had settled Ale Nipper's doubt and questionings forever. 4 white upraised paws quivered protestingly to heaven, the body shuddered, and a dead dog with a battered skull lay on the reddening herbage. In that moment one seemed to have a glimpse of the cool and desperate convict who had got away from Dartmoor, despite warders, loaded guns, in place of the smiling valet. "Damn you, you brute! Why need you go and do that?" shrilled the girl, suddenly whirled into a flimsy passion. "I'd have taken the little dog and looked after it myself. I'd have loved to. Bloody fine thing being able to out a great big beast like him, I should think. Bloody well proud of yourself, aren't you?" For quite half a minute she slanged aimlessly on, while the others looked at her with no more than grave disapproval. To tell the truth, the unforeseen tragedy of the loyal little terrier had got them all more than anything that had gone before. "That'll do, kid. Shut up your face now, you've shed plenty," said one of the men with brusque understanding. Valet did quite right. The pup was bound to go, and that's all that's to it. Rip off the collar, Pips, and shove the rest under some stuff in the wood there. "Yes, but wouldn't they find it there?" questioned the man who had used the drug as he carefully handled the body. "These country birds know all the dogs for miles around, so shifting the collar won't help any." "What the hell, then? It's all of a piece, isn't it? Besides, they most likely won't. Get it well away into a thick scrub, and it'll likely be there for months before that happens. Now, buddy, this to Valet. Number 2's coming in, and he'll go on and give Soapy the nod, and then pass it back on you when Soapy's planted. We're through here?" "Not quite," said Valet, who had apparently been dreaming. "I feel that I ought to carry some marks. The artistic sense demands it. Put me one fairly high. You needn't black an eye or tap the claret, but something that'll show a bruise for the next few days anyhow." "You mean it?" "Didn't I speak?" inquired Valet politely. The other smiled a dour aside, and with a clean, crisp right, laid the artistic conscience sprawling on the level. He got up with no loss of graciousness, dusting his clothes, but on second thoughts left them as they were, to infer the happening. "Oh, my God!" wailed the girl, looking on with tightly clasped hands. Valet didn't deign to notice. "Satisfied?" grinned the big man. "That will do for that, I expect, but I think I ought to show some scratches." Going to the hedge, he selected and hacked out a bramble switch and brought it back. Its curved thorns were as formidable as a wildcat's claws. "Put that across my face, will you?" "Don't!" This time the kid rose to a scream of anguish. "I take it all back about the dog. He had to go, I see. Only don't." "You?" cut in Valet with elegant disdain. "What in all creation have you got to do with it?" "I know well enough," she blubbered. "You think you're paying me out." "Get on with it," said Valet curtly. "Shut your eyes, then," advised the other, taking the switch, and this time he was not grinning. "I don't want to go and blind you." "Keep your own open, and then you won't," was the unconcerned reply. "I have nothing to shut mine for. Look out, then." The cane slashed across mouth and cheeks, and a dozen points of blood followed the thorns. Withdrawal. Valet forbore to wince. The girl ran back to the car, making curious noises. Chapter 7. Doctor. Olivant establishes his bona fides. A.T. About the hour when an unobtrusive motor car, its number plate varied for the third time that eventful day, was taking its turn through Reigate with Mr. Geoffrey Tilehurst, now sufficiently recovered to feel extremely sick, a very helpless passenger, and while in Hoggett's Lane Mr. Valet was, to use a peculiarly inappropriate metaphor, cooling his heels as he awaited an agreed signal, the sun went off the rosebed in the Brookcroft trim front garden, and Miss Tilehurst, armed with leather gloves, "Yes, of course, just as might have been expected," she declared after scrutinizing the roses, "teeming with green fly, and our rates are 7 and 6 in the pound. Ophelia, it is, to be sure, impossible to predict what lines of growth a child will take from the evidence of, say, the first 7 days, and there have been Ophelius and Ophelius. This one, the offspring of an ill-assorted union between a pig-higgler and an idealistic lady's maid, clearly belonged to the second variety. Other mistresses, and the girl had experienced a remarkable succession of these before Miss Tilehurst penetratingly discovered in her certain solid qualities, in the sense of dense, to most employers, that covered many shortcomings. Other mistresses had invariably called her by what they considered more suitable names, generally Jane or Sarah, without reference to her own feelings. Penelope Tilehurst questioned whether this was quite right, and on the other interested party's vague justification that some thought one thing and some another, severely retorted that this was not the point, and that, in any case, Ophelia, with appropriate instances, was nothing to be ashamed of. Ophelia had a way of anticipating wants when she was called. If right, she had discovered that this was regarded as rather clever, but if it happened to be wrong, there was no doubt that she was being very stupid. Privately, she thought that a simpler average should be struck, but, anyway, she was like that, she admitted. She now appeared carrying a filled watering can, and, as this happened to be right, she felt that she had established her position sufficiently to remain and sociably discuss botanical prospects. "That Mrs. Buffy I was with was a rare, for gardening, too," she remarked as a general opening. "Only she was all for snapdragers. Funny she shouldn't know their proper name, wasn't it, She always used to call them anti-rhinos." "Yes, Ophelia, but I shall want several more cans to go on this bed," replied Miss Tilehurst discouragingly. "You had better get the other one out as well and keep bringing them." "That I will, Mum." Hard work had no terror for the simple girl, especially when, as in the present case, it involved nothing with a tendency to just come apart, and contained easy openings for agreeable conversation. "Oh, what had we better say if they catch us at it?" "What's that?" demanded Miss Tilehurst sharply. "What do you mean, Ophelia?" "It's the notice what that man left. I forgot to give it you. explained Ophelia, producing a crumpled printed form from the mysterious depths of her apron pocket. "It says that owing to the draft we shall be incurring a penalty of 40 shillings for the first offense and not exceeding 14 days ever after." Nonsense. Miss Tilehurst had a sublime faith in the personal equation, which sometimes worked out but occasionally failed to be quite so successful. "That can't apply to me, of course. I pay a water rate, and anyone can see that the garden needs watering. Put the notice in the fire, and then I shall be able to say truthfully that I haven't seen it." "That I will, Mum," undertook Ophelia stoutly. "And wait a minute, Ophelia. Don't run away, child, when I'm in the middle of speaking. There's someone doing something in the lane out by the side gate. That tinkering has been going on for the past half hour. On your way back, just glance out there. You needn't let it appear that you've gone on purpose. You can seem to be looking up the lane as if you expected the baker." "He doesn't come till later of a Saturday," objected Ophelia, entering into the spirit of the strategy perhaps even too precisely. "That doesn't matter in the least. They are not to know, or you may be looking for the butcher. But if there are gypsies or tinmen about, we shall have to keep our eyes open after anything they can lay their hands on." Of course it was Ophelia's fault. She ought to have come back with a more coherent tale. But when, on her return with the second can, she breathlessly reported, "The man. Something about water. And look out, Mum, he's coming." Miss Tilehurst not unnaturally jumped, quite literally indeed, to the conclusion that this man must be identical with that man, and the reference to water was only capable of one construction. In spite of her assurance of personal immunity from the obnoxious order, it began to look more serious when this emissary of injustice would seem to have deliberately tracked her down, and it was her rather frantic efforts to conceal her own can among the rose bushes on his approach, and at the same time to induce Ophelia by vigorous gestures to retire in good order with the other, that prevented her from grasping at the outset exactly what it was that the stranger was talking about. "I wonder if I might trouble you," was what he really said. "I see you are busy with it yourself. Just a small can of water?" Quite a personable individual he appeared to be. Dignified, well-dressed, urbane, and he advanced doffing his distinctive hat with a ceremonialism that could not have failed to impress Miss Tilehurst if she had been composed enough to realize it. "Oh no, indeed I'm not. I can assure you that I never use a watering can in the garden," she exclaimed, rather remarkably in the circumstances, meaning, as she afterwards assured herself, that she was not actually using one then, and that in any case she only watered certain special beds and did not, as so many thoughtless people did, waste precious canfuls drenching the entire garden. I beg your pardon." The intruder was, not altogether unnaturally, for the moment nonplussed by the denial he had occasioned. But this did not in the least affect the magnificent composure of his bearing. "The fact is," he deigned to explain with gracious allowance for any misunderstanding, "my chauffeur happens to be away ill, and I'm having some bother with my engines and being held up just outside your gate here." Oh, apologized Miss Tilehurst on several notes of emotion. "Then you are not the water authority." "Madam," he affably admitted with the light touch of a playful buffalo, "I am no authority on water in any form, not even, I regret to find, on the water cooling my own car engines. I'm afraid that my intrusion rather startled you. I ought to have been more explicit. At least permit me to establish my bona fides before I go. My name is Olivant, Drive, Olivant of Harley Street. I am merely a stranger, you see, motoring through your charming district, and having, so to speak, fallen by the wayside." "Oh, Dr. Olivant, I am so sorry," protested the lady, deeply mortified at the unfortunate blunder. "Of course, now that I really look at you," and without actually being so bold as to put the inference into words, Miss Tilehurst made it abundantly clear that in her opinion, no one who really looked at him could by any chance take Drive. Olivant for anything resembling a water inspector. "But seriously, in this water famine, the company is driving us half crazy with its absurd prohibitions and regulations. That," she explained, speaking with extreme clarity and deliberation, "is what I meant just now when I said that a watering can is never much use in the garden. Of course it needs the hose pipe to be effective." "Oh, of course, naturally," agreed Dr. Olivant. "And they don't permit—" "Oh, my goodness, no. It would be a crime of— The situation had gone a little to her head. Ha ha. Dr. Olivant, a crime of the first water. Ha ha, weightily confirmed Dr. Olivant. Very apt, indeed. A crime of the first water. I must tell my colleague, Sir Peter Mullaby, that. He'll appreciate it. And I, here, added Miss Tilehurst, determined to clear her conscience thoroughly by the white fire of voluntary confession, that very soon we may not be allowed to use even a watering can. Really? Contributed the doctor, suitably impressed. In the circumstances, I scarcely like to repeat my request for a small canful. Oh, nonsense, Dr. Olivant. It hasn't quite come to that yet. Ophelia, give Dr. Olivant the can you have. Will that be sufficient for your purpose, Doctor? Oh, quite, I think. Thank you, thank you. I won't keep it a minute longer than I can help, I need hardly say. Pray don't hurry. And if you should want any more, of course, as he reached the gate, you unscrew the nozzle for pouring. Oh, quite so, he acquiesced. Really, did the woman take him for a loon, or was it that she only wanted to hear the sound of her own silly tongue clacking? In the circumstances, Miss Tilehurst decided to go on gardening there, not watering, which would take Ophelia off her work and could be done equally well later, but just tidying up the beds. Then if Dr. Olivant should happen to need a most distinguished-mannered gentleman, a specialist, of course, being in Harley Street, and how immeasurably different from the usual type of country doctor. Dr. Tizer, for instance, was well enough, but ineradicably commonplace, while this locum tenens he had just got, well, it was said that he had been seen buying fried fish himself at one of those malodorous little places in Mutbury. The idea of Dr. Olivant going into Coo-ee-ee, said a voice in playful claim of recognition. Well, I wondered if you would run round this afternoon, Nora. How long have you been there? I never heard you coming. Nora Melhuish was, it may be recalled, the speculative element in the timetable of Tilehurst's arrangements, and now that we have been permitted to see her, the only possible slur on his taste is that he should have taken even the most infinitesimal risk of missing so delectable an encounter. For the rest, she was 19, rather small, rather brown, and rather mysterious in her impressions. On this occasion, she wore neither hat nor gloves, but carried a moderate basket. And as she had come into the garden by the front or road, gate, and along the further path, she had evidently failed to encounter the prepossessing specialist. Oh, not long, replied Nora as they went through the ritual of kissing. Only I heard you talking to someone, so I slunk. Who is he? A Dr. Olivant, a Harley Street specialist, or at least, I suppose he must be. At any rate, his car has broken down just outside there, and he wanted some water. That's what everyone seems to be wanting just now. I feel I'm getting it on the brain myself. Mrs. Haddock says that the vicar is doubtful if he ought to go on praying for rain any longer. It seems to be making a fool of him when nothing happens. Oh, my dear, isn't that rather, for a clergyman? Well, perhaps it is, but they certainly seem to be getting much more snappy. Are you watering the roses? Haven't they cut off your supply yet? Good gracious, no. Are they going to? They say so, all except an hour or two night and morning. And someone goes around listening at those little trapdoor affairs in the road to catch you wasting any, and then fine you. Can they tell that? My dear, what next? And here that tiresome Ophelia's bringing out another canful. Take that back again at once, Ophelia, and don't draw any more. All right, acquiesced the impassive Ophelia. Good afternoon, miss. Just stepped across to see if we were all alive still. Shall I put this lot on the beans, Mum? No, we haven't got to waste any. Pour it down the sink quickly. That I will, Mum. A rather constrained silence marked the time until Ophelia was out of hearing. Of course, I'm glad to find you alive, but I really ran across with a few pears if you care to have them, remarked Nora, displaying the contents of her basket. Jargonelles. We've got heaps and heaps, and I know that yours are all the late kinds. Thank you, dear. They look delicious. You must let me reciprocate towards Christmas. But how did you know that ours are only keepers? Oh, I don't know. Oh, yes, I do. Geoffrey must have told me. I see. You plant pears. For your heirs. Well, whoever planted ours must have credited his posterity with remarkably good teeth. And speaking of that young man, you didn't happen to see anything of Geoffrey as you came along, did you? No. Isn't he here? Said Nora. I expected to find, at least I thought. What I mean is, if we happen to meet and neither of us is doing anything, that's all right, my dear, said Geoffrey's adopted mother. At least I hope that it's going to be. And I'm glad it's you, Nora. It will make me very happy. Oh, Miss Tilehurst, do you really mean that you've noticed anything? I thought that we were both being extraordinarily discreet, and for that matter, Geoffrey, hasn't actually said anything. No, I noticed that you were both rather tongue-tied of late, commented Miss Tilehurst dryly. Well, my dear, if I am to lose my only nephew, and of course I know that in a place like this, a young man's fancy must turn sooner or later to thoughts of either love or golf, I prefer it to be you. Oh, you are a dear, exclaimed Nora, who has been placed at a considerable disadvantage by being introduced just at this stage of her florescence. It would have been too awful if you hadn't. It's so very handy you living just over the way, continued Miss Tilehurst, pursuing her own line of speculation. At least I shall always know where to find him. Well, laughed Nora, that's one way of looking at it, but I hope that isn't the only reason. No, admitted Miss Tilehurst circumstantially. Still, it's a great convenience all the same. And please, please don't let Geoffrey know that we have been talking. My dear, I'm not an absolute beginner. I can't think where he can have got to. Why? Where did he go? That's just what I don't know. He must have gone off somewhere immediately after lunch without saying anything about it. He may have ridden across to Cobbett Corner to see about some repairs to a few cottages I have there. Or he may have gone to arrange some details of the Gymkhana tournament with Mr. Mostyn, who'd written to him this morning. But it's so unlike him not to mention what time to expect him back or where he was going, especially on a day when you might drop in and miss him. But of course, he wouldn't have the faintest idea that I should be here, Miss Tilehurst, protested Nora. Why, I had no idea of it myself until I happened to think. Well, dubiously agreed Miss Tilehurst, perhaps he wouldn't. All the same, I had a strong presentiment that way myself, and there is no reason why the state of his emotions should make him less intelligent. Perhaps Ophelia saw which way he went, suggested Nora. She's just gone across to the coal house. It's quite as likely she asked him where he was going if she did, declared Miss Tilehurst grimly. At any rate, it won't be difficult to find out. I'll warrant she only wanted coal on the chance of a little small talk. Oh, Ophelia, Mr. Geoffrey doesn't happen to have come in at the back while we've been here, does he? No, Mum, or I should have seen him. He got his bicycle out after lunch and went off with Nipper. He didn't say where he was going. When I just said, "Going out for a ride on your bicycle, Mr. Geoffrey?" he said, "No, Ophelia, I'm going for a 3-legged race, only I like to wear this on my watch chain." I thought it sounded funny. Presumably Nora thought so too, for she found it necessary to turn aside and bury her face in a crimson rambler. Miss Tilehurst found it less amusing. "Thank you, Ophelia. That will do. Tell him we are out here if he does return that way." "Yes, Mum." Ophelia appeared to weigh the conditions with conscientious detail. "You mean if he returns in a 3-legged race?" No. If he returns without our seeing him, if he comes in the back way." "Oh, yes, that I will, Mum." Ophelia retired in the full assurance that this must be one of her good days, as she was acquitting herself so successfully, and at intervals snatches of her voice could be heard, subdued by the occasional clatter or bang of domestic zeal, as she confided all that was going on to the cat, sole confidant of her deeper feelings. "Isn't she too dreadful?" lamented Miss Tilehurst, as Ophelia disappeared towards the house. "But she's really such a good, well-meaning girl that I can't find it in my heart to be strict with her. No, indeed. It would spoil a gem. Think of all the priceless things you'd miss hearing. But, if Geoffrey is trundling a pushbike on a day like this, that might easily account for him not getting back as soon as he had intended." "True. I expect that's what it is. And speaking of bicycles, Nora, Who was the young lady I saw dashing about the road on a motorcycle when I looked out at 5 o'clock this morning? Well, what's the use of your brother having a motorbike if you can't practice on it when he's away? It's about the only chance I do get. Oh, this is the first I've heard of you taking it up at all. I'm not an authority, I suppose, for I've always been accustomed to regard even a foot tricycle as rather an advanced form of propulsion for a woman. But you struck me as being remarkably capable for a learner. I am, admitted Nora, with what could only be described as a knowing grin. But please don't let on to anyone about it. I mean to surprise them one of these days. Them? Yes. All at home. Oh, my word. My poor wits must indeed be wool-gathering. Do you know what I came across for? Well, replied Miss Tilehurst, with a spice of affectionate malice, feminine intuition might be equal to the problem. Put into cold words, I should say that you came. Not to see Geoffrey, of course, but to afford him the unutterable pleasure of contemplating Miss Melhuish. Not at all. That may have been why I came, perhaps, but it wasn't what I came for. In spite of that truly feline stroke, dear Miss Tilehurst, I came to do you a kindness. Well, you know all about Uncle Max, of course. You've always said how you wish to meet him. What, Mr. Carrados? Yes, Uncle Max Carrados. Well, he turned up all unexpected this morning in his usual eccentric way. Shall I bring him across for an hour now? I would have done straight off, but I thought you'd like to know he was coming. Yes, indeed, agreed Miss Tilehurst, rather fluttered at the prospect. I should certainly be glad of a few minutes to make myself a little more presentable, but do you think that he would really care? And with almost tragic eloquence, the disparaging hands indicated the circumscribed garden in which they stood, the unpretentious little villa. But whatever do you mean? Why shouldn't he? Well, I should be overjoyed by the honor, of course, but I mean, wouldn't it be rather dull for him? I feel that there ought to be something rather special going on to bring him here for. Only there never is, for that matter. Oh, nonsense, dear. Isn't he with us now? And what's the difference? He doesn't spend every day of his life tracking murderers down and bearding robbers in their dens. Although he's so jolly well off, and rather clever, I suppose, he's really the simplest old dear in the world. Old? The word was rather startling to Miss Tilehurst. I didn't know that Mr. Carrados was at all elderly. Oh, yes. He must be quite 40 now. That's getting on pretty well in years, I should think. Yes, I suppose it is, admitted Miss Tilehurst with a backward glance. It certainly once seemed so. I'll tell you what we'll do to make it something special, Nora. We'll have tea out in the arbor over there. That will be quite like a picnic, won't it? And Geoffrey is certain to be back in time to join us. Splendid, agreed Nora, already on her way towards the gate. I'll dig out Uncle Max and we'll dash back in no time. But you'll give me just a few minutes I'm in the middle of gardening, you know. I feel an awful fright, pleaded Miss Tilehurst, who was rooted in a more ceremonial age when important visitors were not flung upon one in no time. Right you are. Will 20 minutes do? Oh no, never mind the old basket now. I'll take it later on. Cheerio. Splendid, endorsed Miss Tilehurst to herself as another gate, 50 yards away, reverberated on its sorely tried hinges. But how very strenuous. Chapter 8. Max Carrados becomes interested in trifles. With 20 minutes, which probably meant half an hour in the end, up her sleeve, so to speak, Miss Tilehurst felt that she had the situation well in hand, and she even stayed to finish off her work of cutting out the faded roses from the central bed before she gathered everything into the Sussex trug and began to think of her own preparations. Otherwise, she might have missed Dr. Olivant on his second incursion into her domain, and although the interest of the afternoon had shifted materially with the arrangement for Mr. Carrados's visit, it was not to be denied that the doctor, whom even 19 would scarcely presume to call old, cut a very personable figure. "I am returning the watering can with very many thanks," he said in the ceremonious way which Miss Tilehurst thought so distinguished, "but I am afraid that you will think me no end of a nuisance. I find now that if I am to do any good, I shall have to borrow a hammer. Well, I fancy that the resources of my establishment may be even equal to that." replied Miss Tilehurst with the sort of smile which so arch a reply demanded. "At all events, if you will wait here a minute, I feel that I am giving you a great deal of trouble. So far I haven't observed it, and in any case you aren't doing now, since my very exceptional maid is evidently hovering about on the chance of being useful. She has the remarkable quality, Dr. Olivant," confided Miss Tilehurst, holding up a beckoning finger in Ophelia's direction, "of generally being there if she is wanted, or indeed, if she is not wanted. Ophelia, bring this gentleman a hammer, will you? I expect that you'll find one in the kitchen table drawer." "That I will, Mum," replied Ophelia, dashing off like a young mustang. In the circumstances, it did not seem quite nice to Miss Tilehurst to leave one who might be technically regarded as a guest standing there alone. Ophelia could be trusted to be back, as she would herself declare, in half a jiffy, and the doctor would be equal to the conversational moment. "What a lovely old English kind of garden you have," he dutifully remarked. "Flowers are a passion of mine, but of course in Harley Street." A melancholy shake of the head dismissed that famous but unhorticultural thoroughfare from the landscape. "At all events, you shall have one for your buttonhole now, Doctor," said Miss Tilehurst, sacrificing a promising young Betty Uprichard without the least compunction. "Yes, it is rather flourishing, but of course this dreadful drought. Still, if you are going for a holiday, I don't suppose that you will complain on the score of fine weather. I am hoping to reach Eastbourne tonight. Even a doctor, even a nerve specialist, has to knock off now and then. Mrs. Tilehurst, Doctor. Miss Tilehurst." "Miss Tilehurst? Curious. A very old patient of mine, Sir Bellamy Binge, had a sister who married." "Here you are, sir," interposed Ophelia, breaking upon this momentous reminiscence and thrusting a decidedly infirm-looking tool into the doctor's hand. "Don't think you've gone and done it if the head flies off when you're hitting. It often does." "Oh, Ophelia," said her mistress in some concern, "surely we have a better—" "This will do capitally, my dear Miss Tilehurst, I do assure you," professed Olivant. "The strain I shall put upon it is not likely to result in any disaster." And since Miss Tilehurst was not anxious to detain him if it really would do, he retired again to grapple with the intricacies of his car in the quiet side lane, while she took the opportunity of apprising Ophelia of the variation in their usual routine as they went up to the house together. "We shall be having tea in the summer house this afternoon, Ophelia. Miss Melhuish is bringing a gentleman here, and I want to have things a little different." "Tea in the summer house, Mum? That will be nice, won't it?" Ophelia was intrigued, visibly impressed, but also inconveniently reminded. "Did you ever have tea in a hayfield, Mum?" "I did once, and you wouldn't believe." "No." "Yes, but never mind that just now, Ophelia. This gentleman who is coming is blind, and so I want you to be very careful." "That I will, Mum. Does he have a Toby dog, I wonder?" "Dog?" repeated Miss Tilehurst vaguely. "Yes, to lead him about the street. Most of them do. Mother had an Uncle Billy. You must tell me about your mother's uncle. William, another time. I want you to get on with your work now. Mr. Carrados has an attendant, not a dog, but I do not imagine that he will bring him here. Now change as quickly as you can, and then put out the things in the kitchen ready. Were you meaning to use the company tea set out there, the little old cups with blue and gold things on them?" "Yes, the Crown Derby service. And please do be careful with them, Ophelia. Then you had better cut both white and brown bread and butter, some very thin anchovy paste and cucumber sandwiches, and we will have quince jelly and strawberry jam, and for cake cherry and almond." "I say," murmured Ophelia, "anything else I will see to myself, and I will look in at the kitchen between now and then to make sure that you have all the things ready. And, by the way, Ophelia, you may as well put out cups and so on for 5. One never knows. Someone else may drop in. You know that I am bringing Uncle Max, don't you, Miss Tilehurst, dear? And you know that you are coming to Miss Tilehurst's, don't you, Uncle Max, dear? So surely that's enough. I think formal introductions are frightfully stuffy." Miss Tilehurst, with everything going well, had been out in the front garden again when her visitors appeared. Visualizing Mr. Carrados's arrival, she had rather dreaded the ceremony of getting the blind man into a chair in her crowded little drawing room, and almost immediately getting him out again. On a day like that, nothing seemed more natural than to be sauntering about the lawn, and then they could stroll round the garden until tea appeared. After all, what was the good of taking a man who could not see into a drawing room? Both laughed as they shook hands, but Miss Tilehurst felt that she had been defrauded of something that she had looked forward to by Nora's offhand manner, and she was glad that Mr. Carrados took the occasion to rebuke his niece, though of course it was done in the nicest possible manner. "I am afraid that the rising generation thinks a great deal that we used to set considerable store by, frightfully stuffy," he remarked mildly. "I say, we," hoping that Miss Tilehurst sides with me. "So it was, Uncle Max," retorted Nora. "Ghastly stodgy. Family pride and great fat dinners and social tradition. All that hank and bunk and tosh and spludge. Sickening. Well, my dear, I hope that I am not too old to learn even yet. I must begin with the new vocabulary." "It is not we who are too old to learn, Mr. Carrados. It's they who are too young to understand," put in Miss Tilehurst a shade tartly. "Now would you care to walk round the garden and see— Oh, forgive me, You pay me a great compliment, Miss Tilehurst," said Carrados reassuringly. "Already you treat me as an ordinary human being, you see, not as a helpless log. That is what I want people simply to do. Flatter me that I'm not a nuisance. Certainly I should like to go round your garden, and perhaps I shall not miss much. Here, for instance, at the very start there is something that I haven't come across for years." He turned to the rose bed near which they had been standing and indicated a particular bush. "You can only find this in an old established garden nowadays. I hear that it's quite gone out of fashion." "Why? Is there anything special about it?" demanded Nora. "It looks a very ordinary sort of flower as far as that goes. Nothing but its extreme rarity. It would almost seem as though modern conditions kill it. Miss Tilehurst knows what it is, I'll be bound. Don't you see? She's laughing." "Oh, go on, have your little joke, my dears," said Nora benignly. "What is the great scream anyway? I know you're dying to tell me." "It's only an old-fashioned cabbage rose, Nora, and it's called the Maiden's Blush. The curious thing is that it has become almost extinct for some reason." "Saha!" Nora affected a mechanical laugh such as is current in the schoolroom to express non-amusement. "But there are still red cabbages about. They are the sort that get into pickles. Both sorts have their points, no doubt. There was a bush of this against the porch of our old home when I was a boy. Now, uncle, if you are going to wax sentimental over a cabbage, well, a cabbage rose or a rose cabbage, I don't mind. Whatever will you be like when we get to the horseradishes?" "Come along, old dear," she prompted, taking his arm affectionately. "I think Miss Tilehurst wants to speak to someone for a minute." It was, as might be guessed, the punctilious Olivant come to return the tool, for surely it would be extravagant to suggest that he could have any interest in looking into the circumstance of these fresh arrivals in Miss Tilehurst's garden. Nor is it to be assumed that the lady herself had any wish to neglect him, for instead of pleading her guests to get off with a perfunctory, "Oh, thank you," she sent them on ahead, saying, "Excuse me just a moment, please. Take Mr. Carrados along, won't you, Nora?" and waited for the doctor. "May I thank you and return the hammer," he said, with his usual air of raising even the slightest act into a courtly ceremony. "You will be relieved to hear that there was no untoward mishap." Uncle and niece had sauntered on, but at the first words of that distinctive voice, Nora found herself gently detained as Mr. Carrados paused to look at a fine dahlia. "Who is our friend over there?" he asked, dropping his voice to a discreet whisper. "Oh, he isn't anybody. I mean, he doesn't live about here," she replied with the same precaution. "Some London doctor or other. Elephant? No, Olivant. A Harley Street specialist," she said. "That's his car, come to grief in the side lane." "Ah." There must have been some incautious quality in his tone, for Nora fastened on the simple interjection. Why, fraught with all that portent, old dear. You don't happen to know him, do you? I don't know any Dr. Olivant, Nora. Well then, you don't know him. Why won't you say so in a plain, straightforward manner, Uncle Max? I'm afraid you're getting to be rather too fond of being mysterious when there's nothing at all to make a mystery out of. Yes, possibly it is becoming a habit with me, my dear, he admitted. I must reform, or I shall become the very worst sort of back number. Dear Uncle Max, murmured Nora happily. Life was all such an enchanting game, wasn't it? Meanwhile, Miss Tilehurst, having received the hammer with due relief, was furthering the little idea that had occurred to her in the kitchen. If you don't actually need to drive off immediately, Dr. Olivant, perhaps you would take a cup of tea with us before you go on? We shall be having it out here very simply on the lawn presently. You are really extremely kind, Miss Tilehurst. I should certainly enjoy a cup of tea after my exertions. We are only waiting for my nephew to get back, and if he is much longer, we must perforce begin without him. What about 10 minutes? Admirably for me. I think I've located the trouble, but I haven't quite put it right yet. Then that is settled, she confirmed. I will let you know when tea is ready. Isn't it really too bad of Geoffrey just on this of all afternoons? Lamented Miss Tilehurst, after she had consulted her ancient gold watch for the 5th time within 10 minutes. I can only suppose that he has met someone who has inveigled him in for a few games of tennis. Not likely, if he didn't go out in flannels, objected Nora. 10 to 1 that he has drifted back to that utterly rancid old office to put some extra work in. On a day like this, too. Nora, exclaimed Miss Tilehurst almost severely, the family woman's inherent reverence for the source of bread and butter. The office is his business. My nephew, Mr. Carrados, she explained, is connected with the paper mills here, where they make the Bank of England note paper. It is, of course, a highly responsible position. Yes, agreed Carrados. Naturally, where they make the Bank of England note paper, and how extraordinarily interesting his work there must be. Has he to do directly with the paper when it's made? Or is his department purely clerical? That I cannot say, except that I know millions of pounds worth of banknote paper is at times in some way in his keeping. I'm afraid you'll think me dreadfully ignorant, Mr. Carrados, but I understand very little about such things, and to tell the truth, I have always scrupulously refrained from seeming to pester Geoffrey with questions about business. They were gathering raspberries into cabbage leaves then, Miss Tilehurst having asked Carrados if he cared for them with cream, and having received an enthusiastic admission. She now proceeded to assemble all their spoil on the largest leaf, and was surprised to notice that the blind man's contribution to the stock was rather more than either her own or Nora's. Not for the first time that day she wondered secretly whether it was not all an elaborate piece of bluff, with Mr. Carrados able to see just as well as she could. Others beside Miss Tilehurst had in the past experienced a similar misgiving. I think we have reached the limit of our patience now. Geoffrey must put up with husbandman's tea when he does come, she declared as the raspberry business was completed. If you will bring Mr. Carrados round, Nora, I'll run on with these and see if Ophelia has got everything ready. By the way, I asked Dr. Olivant to join us at tea. The poor man must be feeling exhausted. With the trifling exception of a mishap to the green dessert dish, Ophelia felt, as she confided now and then to Sultan, the lethargic Persian, that she was doing all that could be humanly expected. The fragments of the dessert dish had been temporarily secreted under some rags in the sink cupboard, and for the rest Ophelia put her trust in the frailty of human memory and, when it did come out, the softening hand of time. Unfortunately, Miss Tilehurst had this very dish in mind when she came in with the raspberries, so that instead of being able to refer casually to something as having happened in a vague and oblivious past, Ophelia was suddenly faced with the discovery of a fault in which she would be detected red-handed, as it were, and held doubly blameworthy. "Green dish, Mum," she replied, becoming goggle-eyed with conscientious effort. "I wonder what can have become of that. I don't seem to have noticed it about lately." I think the last time must have been when Nipper was eating something out of it. I wonder if he can have broke it somehow." "Nonsense," retorted Miss Tilehurst briskly. "I saw it myself quite lately. And once again, Ophelia, you must not let the animals have our plates and dishes. Never mind looking now, for the conscientious girl was exploring the most unlikely places. This one will do instead. Now go and ask Dr. Olivant if he would care to wash his hands. They may be dirty after that kind of work. And if he would, show him up to the bathroom and take a can of hot water and put out a towel." Ophelia was free to breathe naturally once more, the matter of the green dish being dismissed to a wholly negligible morrow. She sought Dr. Olivant in the lane and delivered her message with scrupulous exactness. "I was to ask you, please, if you'd like to wash yourself after you've done your dirty work, sir." Looking at Ophelia, it was impossible to suspect her of elaborate guile, and Dr. Olivant did look at her. For fully 5 seconds he bent a level glance on her unsophisticated features. Then he looked at his own hands, and with a short laugh detached himself from the consideration of engine troubles. "Well, yes, it would be as well, perhaps, wouldn't it?" he admitted. "Come now, my dear," as she stood awkwardly waiting for him to lead the way, and he for her. "If we are to get on, you must be my cicerone." "That I never will, sir," appallingly retorted Ophelia, bristling up into virtuous indignation. "The very idea! And a gentleman like you, too. I shall leave your water outside the bathroom door now." "Don't be silly, girl. That only means that you've got to show me where I am to go," explained Olivant, his manner at once dropping several degrees in the social register. And as he followed, he privately commented beneath his breath on her inopportune want of sense in terms that would have been surprisingly fundamental for Harley Street. "I find that we shall have to give up the idea of sitting in the arbor," said their hostess as the sauntering pair appeared. "The table is all right to serve the tea from, but the rustic seats are definitely not equal to the responsibility of being sat on. And I know of nothing more embarrassing than to find one's chair collapsing when you have a cup of tea in one hand and a plate of something in the other." "I think it rather fun," said Nora. "After all, it helps out a picnic." "Then you shall provide the fun, dear," declared Miss Tilehurst. "Dr. Olivant can do as he likes when he arrives, but I insist on Mr. Carrados being less humorous. There is a garden form under the catalpa, Mr. Carrados, if you prefer the shade, or a chair here in the open." "I am all for the sun while it lasts, if you give me the choice," said Carrados, putting out his hand unerringly and accepting the chair Miss Tilehurst had indicated. "We don't get so many summers like this in England that you can afford to throw away a minute of one." "Heroic man! And you, Nora? Seriously, the bench in there is out of the question?" "Then perhaps I can be useful," suggested Nora. "If not, I'll be one of the shady ones." "Useful? Well, Ophelia can take the tea, but perhaps he wouldn't mind, when Dr. Olivant appears, if you would bring him across. He mayn't quite like—" "That I will, Mum," undertook Nora playfully. "Sugar and cream, Mr. Carrados?" asked Miss Tilehurst, seeing that Ophelia had arrived at the arbor with the tea tray. "Cream. No sugar, thank you." It is as well, since it had some little bearing on the course of events that afternoon, and thereafter perhaps for centuries, to indicate the rearrangements of positions that had come about from so trifling a cause as the dilapidation of the summer-house appointments. The tea, as originally planned, was laid in there, with Miss Tilehurst pouring out, and Ophelia acting as a connecting link between supply and demand until her services were dispensed with. Mr. Carrados, choosing the sun as we have seen, sat on an isolated chair some little distance from the arbor, while on the other side of the grass plot, in the shade of a catalpa tree, a substantial bench accommodated drive. Olivant when he came out, and Nora and Miss Tilehurst in turn as they went backwards and forwards refilling cups and offering the more substantial refreshment. Geoffrey had not yet arrived, but of course he must any minute now. And in the minds of 3 out of the 5 people there, his absence, as the time went on, was the one thing that engrossed them. 3 out of the 5. But which 3? "Your cup of tea, sir," considerately announced Ophelia, approaching Mr. Carrados and regarding him with fascinated interest. "I was to be careful. You're blind, aren't you?" "Yes, Ophelia. Quite blind. he replied with a reassuring smile as he took the cup and saucer neatly from her. "You don't know of things that go on, then?" she elaborated. "Sometimes kind people tell me of them." He stirred in the floating cream deliberatingly. "If they think it will amuse me." "Amuse!" she giggled at the recollection. "Not half it wasn't. You ought to have seen him with his mustache coming off when he washed his face there. It did look funny, I can tell you. It must have done. Did he know you saw him?" "Not him. I was looking through a place where he couldn't see me." "Ophelia! Come, Ophelia!" called out Miss Tilehurst, and with a friendly nod and the consciousness that she had done her best to amuse, Ophelia ambled back to the arbor. "Bread and butter or anchovy sandwiches, Uncle?" inquired Nora, coming round in turn. "Charming man, that sort I abhor. Makes you feel it must lead up to borrowing a $5 every minute. Or raspberries first?" "Sandwich, thanks." He dexterously put down the cup on the grass beside him. Nora knew better than to butt in with help, and supplied himself from the plate she offered. "By the way, don't you want to go out into the road to see if anyone is coming?" "Not particularly. Why?" "Oh, I think I should. Perhaps because I want you to. Uncle Max, what is to be the hocus-pocus now? You've suddenly gone rather serious." "I don't know that there will be any hocus-pocus, Nora, but I think it may have suddenly gone rather serious." "Very well. I know that when... Tell me what I am to do." "Keep your wits about you and don't give anything away. You are going to look down the road to see if Tilehurst isn't coming. Get the number of that car, and let me have a description." Nora passed on, admirably calm, to the other guest and smiled off on him another anchovy sandwich. Then she returned her stock to the arbor, and securing her own tea and plate, began to walk across to the shade of the catalpa. "Oh, I think I'll just give a look to see if Geoffrey is in sight yet and hurry him up if he is," she called back. "He's really naughty." "Yes, do, dear," approved Miss Tilehurst, following her across. "But don't stay out looking. I'm going to sit with Dr. Olivant for a minute now, but I feel that we are neglecting our visitors, shockingly. It would have been different if we could have all been together in the summer house. As it is—" "Have another sandwich, sir, while they're here," croaked Ophelia confidentially at the blind man's elbow. Being unable, as she argued, to look after himself, she was moved to take him under her special protection. "I know these picnic parties. Once a thing's gone, you're never sure if you'll ever see it again. A bird in the hand is what I believe in being." "I think you are quite right," he admitted no less confidentially. "But not yet. Thank you. This time I'll risk it." Nora came back from the side gate again, and for a moment loitered at the bench, claiming her tea and plate with the light flippancies of the occasion. "No sign of the defaulter yet," she reported, to Miss Tilehurst chiefly. Then, nibbling her bread and butter, she passed on to Carrados to see how he was faring. "Dark blue Lamartine four-seating tourer, four-wheel brakes, mica screen, disc wheels and Carey's spare one, cased, left of engine, Sphinx mascot. And the toolbox has a hammer in it." "Good girl," he commended, taking out a slender notebook and proceeding to make an inconsiderable entry. "Number? PZ 9741. Just as well to have it, though for a certainty it's bogus." "What is bogus for a certainty, you two conspirators?" loudly proclaimed Miss Tilehurst, innocently taking advantage of their absorption and the muting grass to spring this devastating revelation. Carrados felt Nora's sterilized dismay as he smilingly took over the situation. "My niece thinks she has made a find, one of Wheatley's Cries of London, in a Mutbury second-hand shop," he obligingly explained. "But I tell her that there are 100 fakes for every genuine copy. Still, it might be worthwhile. I wonder if Dr. Olivant knows anything of prints. Some doctors have uncommonly good things on the walls of their reception rooms. We might ask him." "Oh, doctor, do you know anything about prints?" called out Miss Tilehurst, glad of the opportunity to make the talk more general, and Olivant politely came forward. "Miss Melhuish thinks that she has discovered a rare engraving in a shop somewhere, only Mr. Carrados is afraid that it may be, What is it? Bogus. We wondered if you knew. I fear I must admit my ignorance, replied Dr. Olivant, making the admission sound more weighty than most other people's claim to extensive knowledge. It is a subject that— I beg your pardon, Miss Tilehurst? Geoffrey at last. The interruption had been. Her mind off like a bird as the front gate clanged, and a man was seen through the laurels. "Oh, Geoffrey," she exclaimed in a voice of petulant relief. "You are a—" And then, as he came round the bend, in a voice that was drained of every shade of expression but dismay, "Geoffrey,